Got to put your smiley face on there. All right. Hey guys, so Alec asked a great question, which was, um, hey, this Fidelity large cap growth model seems to really be lagging. Has anybody else noticed that or paid attention to that by chance?
Hmm.
Well, so I've actually had this question from a few people, but not specifically about this fund. In fact, as a reference, I did a Zoom check-in with an existing client this morning, and he had sent me his current employer. He has essentially two employer plans. He's a doctor, and he's like, "Hey, that my 403b seems to be doing better than my 401a. What do you think?" And there's some minor differences in holdings. And my response to him was, as long as broad allocations are similar, there's going to be variance in Fund A is going to do better than Fund B for a period of time. Fund B is going to then do better than Fund A. If over a sustained period of time we see a big change, then I think we want to lift the hood up and wonder what's going on. So just for context, I want to keep this relatively brief because I know David's got some things prepared today. What I'm showing you right here is these are the models I've built. Most of you guys are using these models. And I'm always, my disclaimer is always like, just because I'm using this doesn't mean you have to use this. Number two, just because I'm using this doesn't mean it's going to be the best. Like no fund, if there was a fund that materially outperformed everything else over a period of time, um, then essentially that doesn't exist. The reason it doesn't exist is because, by definition, if something had a significant advantage, that'd be what's called an inefficient thing. Like in other words, if some people knew about a fund that performed better than everybody else, but not the whole market knew about it, that's it. That creates an advantage for a return. But markets become efficient, and so when people realize, hey, large cap growth is doing better than large cap value most of the time, well, more and more people buy into large cap growth, and it just creates a more average return profile. So in other words, there's a lot of large cap growth options on our platform. And without bouncing around on here, we can go to the research tab and you can look at, different things. In fact, it's worth doing. I'm just showing you my model right here. So my aggressive model, I've got 20% allocated to this large cap growth mutual fund. So if we go back here to research and click all solutions, let me minimize this here. I'm going to do a quick 3 year benchmark search, and I go to mutual funds. So as we scan down this, you're going to see over the last 3 years, the number one performer is precious metals. Then we've got just semiconductors, which obviously is grabbing a big theme in the market right now. But essentially, out of 78 funds, including the S&P 500, Fidelity Large Cap Growth is right up here towards the top at 21% annualized rate of return. By context, the S&P is at 18.3. So, not a lot of funds, not a lot of themes outperform the S&P over a long period of time. And so what I would call growth is I would call that a factor. So anytime you invest in something that's got a specific tilt, so, growth is a factor, value is a factor, things like momentum is a factor, high dividends is a factor. So, there's a bunch of those kinds of things. And so I'm just a growth investor over time. I just think that's where most of the growth is going to happen in the market, which sets up Alex's question. Okay, if we're going to invest in overweight US growth, what's going on? Why is this particular growth composite or growth index underperforming? I don't know what. Let's just call it the NASDAQ, call it the Qs. Well, back to this idea that not all funds are the same and not all funds are going to outperform at all times. So one thing I want to show you is if I bounce over here, this is the Fidelity Large Cap Growth Index. And I'll tell you why I selected this when I could have selected to bounce back here. I could have selected just the NASDAQ. That would have been probably the next most close comparison. And you'll see even in this return, this is through, well, actually, this is through only Q1. So I'm going to show you more current information in a minute. But just through Q1, you're seeing the NASDAQ is up 25, the large cap growth is up 18. So in other words, in recent performance, the NASDAQ has done a lot better than this growth index. So if I come back here to this growth index, you can see over a large period of time, it's done really well compared to the large cap growth, kind of universe, let's call it. And then this is the Russell 1000. So this is a great lesson in what is what. Okay, so does anybody know? So are all you guys have heard of like the NASDAQ, but then you've heard of like the Qs, the QQQ. Does anybody know how many stocks are in the Qs?
100.
Good answer. It's called the NASDAQ 100. I intentionally didn't say that. How many
Yeah.
stocks are in the NASDAQ 100? All right, bonus question. How many stocks are in the S&P 500?
504.
Wrong, 600. Actually, it's 500. So you guys get the drift. So how many stocks are in this growth index? Well, it'll say it on here somewhere. Right here, as of 5/31, 390 holdings. So let's start with over time. Now, I don't think there's a statement I could make that 390 holdings are better than 100 or 100 are better than 300. The only thing I can definitively tell you is there's going to be times when the 390 beat the 100, and there's going to be times when the 100 beats the 390. Okay. What's really interesting is if you look at just look at some of these top holdings. So Nvidia is 13%, Apple's almost 12, Microsoft's almost 9. If I come over to the QQQ, instead of Nvidia being 13, Nvidia is 8. Instead of Apple being, what was it, 12, it's 7. Microsoft, instead of being 9. So at first glance, you might say, well, the growth index appears to be more concentrated than the Qs. And the truth is, it's kind of like a barbell fund. It's more concentrated at the top. In other words, the top 10 holdings of the growth index that we own in our portfolio represent a bigger chunk. Look at this, top 10 holdings represent 61% of the portfolio. The Qs, the top 10 holdings represent 52% of the portfolio. So on one hand, the top weightings are more concentrated. On the other hand, as you get down the list, you're going to pick up a lot more diversity, a lot more sectors within sectors in the large cap growth index. And so I'm not necessarily saying one's better than the other, but I will say that the recent performance we're picking up, that's a difference, is candidly some of these larger holdings have lagged a little bit in the last couple months. It doesn't faze me one bit because just because something lags a little bit short term, you're going to have what's called mean reversion. And so let me give you a great chart. So I just Googled QQQ versus FSPGX, which is the large cap growth index. There's a bunch of kind of like sites that you can click on that give you some information without paying. But this is a good one right here. So through, what is this? This is through real recent here. This is just through last week. Basically, it's saying that the QQQ is up 16% year to date. The large cap growth index is up 4. Wow, that sounds terrible. Well, let's zoom out just a little bit. If we look at over the last year, the large cap growth index is also lagging. But here's where you got to understand what you're looking at. At cursory glance, you would say the Qs are up 35. This growth index is up 21. What in the world is happening? This feels terrible. But really, all of that outperformance can be explained year to date because these two things were like a pair of railroad tracks through the end of last year. And now all of a sudden, all this stuff is year to date. Candidly, there were times, even within the last 12 months, that the growth index was outperforming the Qs. Let's zoom out a little bit more. Now look at this. What you're noticing is, and this is something we haven't ever covered before, but it's worth covering. The further you go back in a chart, this is what we would call a mountain chart. The further you get back, there's this thing called distortion. And it's basically to fit all this data on a screen where you can see it. recent performance is going to look a lot more different, plus or minus, than longer term performance, right? That's why if you ever look at a stock market chart that that goes back to like 1929 or something, like it looks like the market just like ho hummed along for like 80 years and then all of a sudden like does this. Well, that's kind of a distorted view of that. As a sidebar, I didn't really know this, but like if you look at a map of the world on your computer screen and you look at a globe, the world looks very different. The map of the world makes Africa look, I mean, large, but kind of the same size as like the US. In real life, Africa is way bigger than North America. It's distortion. Okay. So it can lead you to draw some dangerous conclusions. I'm not necessarily saying the large cap growth index is better than the Qs. What I am suggesting is that over time, you're going to have virtually the same performance, but you're picking up some more diversification and you're doing it at a lower cost. So if you were to buy the NASDAQ fund on FMAX and put it in your portfolios, you can all do it, but you're going to pay 20 or 25 basis points a year, where the large cap growth index is 3.5 basis points a year. So over 5, 10, 15 years, I'd rather have my proposals at a lower fee. I'd rather have more diversification. I just feel better for that with client money management. And so here's a question for you guys, and we could all speculate the answer. But would you guys agree that generally speaking, there's been periods where the growth index has outperformed the Qs and periods where it's underperformed, but they continually cross. So what do you think is more likely to happen over the next 12 to 18 months? Is it more likely that this gap continues to widen and the Qs continue to outperform the growth index by more and more and more? Or do you think we're going to have mean reversion where the growth index is going to pick up and catch back up to the Qs? What do you guys think?
The latter.
Guys, I bet my entire net worth that the growth index is going to revert back to the mean and crisscross again with the Qs again. So what does that mean for you and your client portfolios? It means as long as we're doing the right things, which we are, and we're in the right holdings and we're not tactical, so we're not going to have any kind of in and out moves that are going to whipsaw us. We're riding these horses. You guys, you've got some pent up returns to come as market dynamics shift a little bit. Because if I see Rolla's raising her hand, I'm gonna answer your question in a second, Rolla. I'll give you one example. You guys, Micron Technology, for instance, I mean, that's up like 150 or 200% year to date. So just that one holding in the top 10 is one of the reasons why the Qs look a little bit better. NVIDIA's actually underperformed. Apple's underperformed. Microsoft's underperformed. There's always these rotations under the surface in the market. And so I think having the right allocation and sticking to it over time is really important, because if we're constantly skating all over the rink to wherever the puck is, you're just going to be chasing returns forever. Because what a novice would do right now would be, man, the Qs are doing way better than the growth index. I'm going to sell the growth index and buy the Qs. That would be a disaster, because I'll bet you anything you want to bet that over the next 12 months, the growth index is going to, from here, I put all of my chips on the growth index beating the Qs on a net basis based on that idea of mean reversion. Does that make some sense? Rolla, you had a question?
How often do our portfolio managers are they buying and selling in the FMAX?
Great question. It's a great question. So if I go back to, let me pull the model up again. So if we pull the aggressive model, so my aggressive model is 3 funds. So the funds I've put in here aren't going to change at all unless I change. Okay. So the S&P 500, it's kind of self-managed. I'll give you an example. SpaceX will be in that index eventually. Now, the S&P 500 committee has decided they're going to make SpaceX wait a year, so that'll go in next year. But every month, every couple months, there's constantly like, stock number 550 a year ago through appreciation, might climb into the top 500. And so they have to sell the bottom couple stocks out of the index to add the climbing. So it's kind of a self-fulfilling index. The NASDAQ 100 is the same way. You might have a stock in there today that last year was number 130 in the NASDAQ. And so every month or every couple months, they're doing some automatic rebalancing within those indexes. So that's going to happen. But then this Fidelity target allocation model, that's 60% of the overall allocation. This particular model, which is made up of, 12 funds or so, this is being rebalanced every quarter. So every quarter, Fidelity is going to come in here and they're going to make some adjustments to, some of these holdings. But again, they're going to be pretty minor adjustments. They're not going to go all over the rink, trying to chase the puck. They're just going to do on the margin some rebalancing and some tilting, and that's part of what we're paying that little extra fee for. You're paying 25 basis points because some of these funds are a little bit more expensive than index funds. But if we come back to research, what are you getting for that? Well, if I come up to FSPs and go to aggressive, so again, over the last 3 years, if you look at that portfolio, it's averaged 18.06%. And you come down to like a Vanguard portfolio, not exactly apples to apples because the holdings are a little bit different, but 16.77. So in my mind, the better allocation and the active management of that is added that extra return compared to just a buy and hold Vanguard strategy where there's no reallocations being done. But again, back to what we just said, there's no manager that's going to outperform in all cycles. That's literally impossible. And so if you look at just the last 1 year, and again, this is somehow my dashboard set to March 31st here, but if you go just to 1 year, the Fidelity model's up 20.86, Vanguard's up 21.28. So, there's going to be periods of time when Vanguard does a little bit better, but I'd rather ride the Fidelity horse over time versus the Vanguard horse. That's just my personal opinion. So, any other questions on this? All right.
Well, yeah,
Okay.
thank you for that. Yeah, I appreciate it. Cool. Well, let's switch gears here. So, David Wynn is going to cover training here for the next about half hour or so. David and I talked yesterday. He's going to cover a number of topics. So, since there's a number of new people in the room, he's going to share a little bit about his story and getting up and going in business. But uh, over the last few weeks, he's talked about countless referral after referral after referral that he's getting. And I thought it would be of value for him to talk about some things that are being discussed with clients, how he's going about serving people and generating these. And I want him to then tee it up for kind of all of us that are getting some referrals to be talking about how we're generating business that way. So, David, I'll let you take the floor here.
Okay, sounds good. I don't have anything to share, so I don't need that capability. But yeah, just so you guys know, David Wynn, I work closely with my wife here, Lisa, up in our office up in Bridgeport, Michigan. So our office is right off 75. I know you guys are right off 23, so we're just literally off right off the same road up here in mid-Michigan. So yeah, just so you guys know, I came into this business with zero experience and zero knowledge about 13 years ago. I never even went to college. I moved out of my house right when I turned 18 and started working in IT. Did that for a few years. I did manufacturing for 7 years here in the Mid-Michigan area. So when I came into this business, I thought IRA was a lady's name. I didn't even know it was an individual retirement account. So you guys are probably coming into this with a little more knowledge than I did, literally starting from nothing. But one advantage that I did have is I was so dissatisfied and so miserable in my previous job. I was never going back to that again. I didn't care what it took to make this work. If going back to where I was not an option. So that was definitely a big advantage that I had. And then, real briefly, too, I know most of you know I've had some health issues, and I'll briefly go over those here. But the reason I want to is that I want to talk about how powerful this business is and how incredible it is that we can build true passive recurring income and have upward mobility in in our income. So about 7 years ago, I got rheumatoid arthritis. I lost the use of both of my pinkies. I have still some fingers that don't work. I'll probably just have to deal with that the rest of my life. A couple years later, I got colon cancer. A couple years after that, I started having TIA strokes. I had multiple TIA strokes, and then that led into hundreds of grand mal seizures over a 3 to 4 year period. Thankfully, the last 12 to 18 months, my seizures are down about 90%. Still not 100% done with those. But if you look at that, look at what that journey has been like. I could not have kept a normal job by doing this. There's no way I could have stood in a concrete floor for 10 hours a day. And having this business and the things that I did in the beginning of my career paved the way for this to work even through my illness. And so, one of the things that I did in my first 7 years, even though it didn't pay off immediate dividends, was I was very intentional about building relationships and building specific key relationships, and also just getting every client I could and then taking care of those clients. I had so many meetings, so many opportunities that fell through that nothing came of it, or at least nothing came of it at the time. And it became discouraging, like putting all this time and effort into something and then nothing's coming of it. And then now, fast forward that 10 years later, so many of the referrals that I'm getting now and the business that I'm getting now are from those relationships that I developed my first few years in the business. And I love what James Schwartz says when he gets asked, "What did you make your first year in the business?" And he says, "I don't know. I'm still getting paid on it." So I think that's the best way to answer that question. And it not only is it just letting people know, we really don't know until it all is said and done what we're going to make in our first few years of business, but also it gets people thinking differently because people like myself, when I'm coming out of a machine shop or I'm coming out of the corporate world, I can't understand really the power of passive recurring income. I don't understand getting paid on something that I did 10 years ago. I can't comprehend that because you start over at zero every year. Even people in this industry, a lot of advisors in the industry start over from zero every year. They don't have passive recurring income. So that has been absolutely huge for me to be able to have that. And if let's say you're getting started, you're wondering what type of key relationship should I be looking to form? Here are just a few that I went for and that have been my best source of referrals. If you can find, and this is what's worked for me. If you guys have a different philosophy, great. But you want to find an accountant or a CPA that if you can develop a close relationship with them, somebody that you can refer business back and forth to, they are a fantastic source of referrals, especially if you tell them exactly what you're looking for. Accountants are fantastic. Also, an estate planning attorney. That has been very helpful for me as well. Not only do I have somebody to refer business to in that area, they also can send me referrals as well. And then also a mortgage broker. Mortgage broker, I was not looking for somebody that worked for a bank or a credit union or anything like that because they typically refer all of their business in-house. I'm looking for an independent, like a self-employed, similar to what we are, like a hungry entrepreneurial type of mortgage broker. And I was able to find one that I think is probably the best in this area. And we've been able to refer a lot of business back and forth to each other. In fact, some of the biggest cases I've done in the past year and a half have been from him. And by the way, he's not even my client. The mortgage broker is not my client, and yet he has still sent me some of the best referrals that I have ever had. So those are some really, really good places to start if you're looking at what kind of relationships do I want to have. And then another advantage that I had is I was able to join a group called BNI. I don't know if BNI is as big now as it was 10 years ago. It's really big, 10, 15, 20 years ago. And that group, just being in those meetings every single week, one thing that worked to my advantage with the group that I went into is it was the second largest group in Michigan for one thing, but I was treated like a conquering hero when I came in because the guy that I replaced was an absolute jerk. He worked for New York Life, and then he switched and worked for Mass Mutual. So he's trying to churn everybody to the new company. Well, New York Life last week was the best company on the planet. Now Mass Mutual is the best company on the planet. And he was just a jerk on top of that. So when I went into the group, it was just such a breath of fresh air, and I was able to get a lot of business referrals from that. So whether it's BNI or another networking group or something you guys can plug into young entrepreneurs, that's a really good thing to be able to plug into. And so I wanted to touch base on a couple of client cases that I've worked on, maybe two or three of just I've worked on just here in the past couple of months, and then talk about how I'm getting referrals. to close this out. So I wrote, I know many of you have asked me about this large IUL that I wrote. It was about a 45,000 point case, something along those lines. That was a relationship that I have had for 20 plus years. Back when I worked in IT, when I was working in Chicago, that's where I met my wife. This guy was a coworker of mine. We hit it off really well, became friends. He moved back to California, where he's from, Orange County. I would go out and see him on a regular basis. We just had a relationship. We had a friendship. I did a $2 million IUL on him about 12 years ago. It would have been my first or second year in the business. And then there have been some circumstances that came up last year where he was part owner of a company and one of his business partners died. He was 38 years old, had a family, and I think he was either at work or at home. He just fell over dead. And he was 38 years old. And this kind of shook my friend up pretty badly. And he's like, we need to talk. Let's talk about my situation. So that was a great opening for me to get back in. Let's take a look at everything. Let's look at, assets, liabilities, insurance, and all this stuff. And there's something we were able to do on the asset side, but also his $2 million was no longer sufficient coverage because his income had gone up quite a bit. So we increased the face amount on his IUL up to 5 million. And he also dumped in some money that he had from another business sale that he had. So that's where that came from. There was nothing magical about that. It was just a matter of me having a 20-year relationship with this guy. And every 6 to 12 months, we are constantly talking. We are constantly following up with each other. And most conversations are, hey, how are you? How's your wife? How's your sister? I used to work with a sister. Those are the conversations we're having. We're not even talking about the stock market or finances or anything like that. So just maintaining relationship with an existing client was able to lead to that. And he does not like term insurance. He wants to know that the money he's putting into something is going to result in something. So the IUL is just a perfect fit for him. So we expanded his out to 5 million. So that way now he knows if something happens to him like it did his business partner, he's properly covered and he's good to go in that regard. Another case that I've had, I just sat down with a couple. They're one of my Betterment clients. And I sat down with them 11 years ago to set up their accounts. They had a $25,000 net worth 11 years ago. And I got them maxing out their Roth IRAs. I have them putting in every penny that both of their employers will match on their 401k. And they have $600,000 liquid net worth now, 11 years later, just by me getting them on the right path. They'd gone from 25,000 to 650. So at the time, it's not a great client. It's like, it's great to help those guys get up and running, get them on the right path. But then you look at down the road, just 10, 15 years later, what a difference that can make, how we can make a huge difference in people's lives. I mean, their kids aren't even out of high school yet, and they have almost 750,000 liquid. So they're doing fantastic. Another case is this was a very different situation. The previous couple was a very young couple. Now this one is one that was within 5 years of retiring, and I had known this guy. He worked with my dad. I'd known him for probably 20 years, not in a professional capacity, just a friendship capacity. When I got started in the business, probably 3 or 4 years in. He was a little apprehensive. He did have a good chunk of money, but he moved over one of his old IRAs to me. It was 120,000. He moved that over to me, and it almost like a trial, like, hey, what can you do with this? And the IRA that I was managing pretty much every single year was outperforming his 401k. And it was pretty much the same risk tolerance as well. And so that really opened his eyes, like, okay, David knows what he's doing. Like he really that kind of expanded his opinion of what he thought of me and my capabilities. And then a couple of years later, his wife retired, and we rolled over her IRA to the same platform as him. And Alec and I talked about this yesterday. He's like, "Is there any key questions that you had or hurdles you had to overcome?" The reason I'm bringing up this case is because she was apprehensive to roll over her IRA, which was $250,000 at the time. She said, "I've always heard that you never want to put all your eggs in one basket." And so she was basically saying, Fred, your money is here. Why would I put my money on this same platform if your money's here? We don't want to have all of our money right here. And what I said was what that saying is referring to is diversification. Okay. You don't want to have all of your money in one thing. So I went and I showed them here are the three different models or the funds that you would be in. This one right here, this is 500 different companies. This one right here, this is 300 different companies. This one right here, this is 1,500 different companies. So I'm breaking down, this is how diversified you guys will be, even though you're technically on the same platform. And after that explanation, the paperwork was signed, the money was moved over, and it's remained there ever since. She had that concern. She was basically saying, tell me why we should do this when it goes against what I've been told to think. So I didn't dismiss it. I didn't say, hey, you should put all your eggs in one basket. I explained to her why what we're doing is not that. So I think that was very helpful. So yeah, Rolla, go ahead. Yeah, this is interactive. If you guys have any questions, go ahead and shoot them out. Go ahead, Rolla.
So how can we help when we do the diversification? You said you had like 1,500 funds in one potential recommendation. How would we be able to overcome overlap or
So
lessen overlap?
yeah, so if we have, so for example, I have there were three different funds that they were in. One was in the strategic alternative core, which is very different from the large cap growth fund that we're in. So one of them is growth oriented. The other one is basically I was able to explain the three different funds that she's in. They're all very different and how they're structured. But I kept it even simpler than that. I just said this one is in 500 different things. This one is in 100 different things. This one's in. I basically said this is spread out through all different kinds of things. If somebody's specifically concerned about overlap, that I mean that would have to probably have to be addressed a different way. That's where you just basically show them, and that's where FMAX is nice with proposals. It'll say here is where the allocations are. Let's say you have 30% in this allocation, 20% in this one, 20% in this one. It's very well broken out on the proposal that we have now. So that is nice. Yeah. So yeah, it's been just important to make sure that we have it broken down correctly, and that we can also explain it. Because I was able because I knew like the back of my hand the funds that I was recommending, so I was able to say, hey, this is what this fund's in, this is what this fund's in, and I was able to overcome that objection. Or it wasn't really an objection; it was more of a question like, why should we do this? And I was able to overcome that immediately by doing that because I knew neither one of them really knew the ins and outs of investing. They just, in general, I conceptually knew what they wanted, and so I was able to address that right away for them.
So
Um,
if I can jump in for a second,
yeah,
I
yeah,
want to,
go ahead.
want to slow this down a little bit. So you just said
Yeah.
something really valuable there. You said it wasn't an objection, it was kind of more clarification. So for those that are new here, if we say, hey, we should do a Roth IRA, and someone's like, it's not because it's an objection necessarily. It might be asking for more clarification. So I think especially then reverting back to the topic of kind of getting referrals, when we can understand where our client is at, where they're coming from, it I think it helps them understand that we know who they are to their core, as opposed to this is a recommendation, I need to get you in and out as quick as physically possible. So when you can read someone and know to say, hey, I want to pause here for a second, like David, specifically the question of like, hey, I've heard I shouldn't put all my eggs in one basket. Well, hey, you're wrong, and let me tell you why. Hey, what do you mean by that? Or can you explain further where your thought process is? Because I agree. Now, everyone, every financial expert would have put all of their eggs into SpaceX Friday at 12:01 p.m. and they'd sell out today. Um, you know, but no one's an expert like that. So, that's where we say, hey, I want to explain we probably don't want to do that, but if we can have some diversification and this account has this purpose and this role, all of a sudden they will understand. If someone like, for example, one of my new teammates reached out to someone yesterday and they initially said no, it's not that they're saying no to you. It might be now's not the right time, or an account. Hey, maybe now's not the right time to move this account over to do this product or move forward with this life insurance. Not because I hate you as a person or not because it's not definitively a no. It's, well, let's go another layer deeper. So think of what we do here as an onion. Just because we're on the outer layer, we probably need to get another layer or two deeper. And I think when we can do that for somebody and craftfully do that, There's art and there's science to what we do here. And when you can explain the science through the art, that's when people say, Alec gets me, David gets me, Tony gets me, Logan gets me. I think other people need to be understood. They need to be heard. That's where referrals come in. And by David really taking time with these people and these examples he's giving, he's demonstrating not only do I know what I'm talking about, but I know you. And people really feel comfortable with that.
Yeah, and essentially I was agreeing with her, like, yes, you would not put all your eggs in one basket, and that's why we're diversifying for you. And the same thing with people that say, talk about Dave Ramsey. I'm like, great, Dave Ramsey, fantastic. Probably, 90, 80, 90% of what we do is right in line with him. I don't have to go up against that. It's just fantastic. And then the one more client that I wanted to highlight is I mentioned the mortgage broker earlier, and I mentioned this about a month ago. I wanted to mention it again. Talking about referrals. I just sat down with a couple that would have been what they call a sixth generation referral from this guy. So
Mm,
this guy, Brian, referred me Mike. He referred me Larry. He referred me Paul. He referred me Mario. Mario referred me Jack and Betty. Okay, I just sat down with Jack and Betty. They're selling two golf courses. So they've got a little bit of money they're going to invest. We've already invested some of it. They have another one that's going to sell here in July. So we'll have a bunch more money to invest at that point. But anyway, all of those came from trust relationships, starting with the mortgage broker. His neighbor told him, said, "I am miserable at my job. How can I need to? I want to retire early." He's only 55. Like, how, can I heard online I can retire early, but the guy at work says I can't, and he says you've got to talk to David. Talk to David and see if you can make this work. He sat down with me, and he just turned 56. He's been retired for a few months, and he's the happiest he's ever been. He is so happy. I got him to retire 5 years earlier than anybody else would have because not to make a long, this could be a whole nother training, but we're able to use the rule of 55 with his 401k plus set up a pension account for him. So when he turns on Social Security, he's going to have Social Security plus his pension plus a nest egg. His wife's going to work part time. He is 100% set for retirement at 55. So that's really cool to get people out because I know how miserable it is to work in a blue collar job, standing on a concrete floor 10 hours a day. And these guys, if they can get out early, they'll love you forever. So I've been able to help multiple people be able to retire at between 55 and 60 this past year or so. Um, and I guess kind of to wrap this up, I want to talk about referrals and go ahead, Rolla. Yep.
Yeah, I just would say for all the new people, and I know I've been here for a little bit, but for all the new people, just take advantage of your leadership. David gets on the phone with me when I need to talk to a client or a family member, and he really does go through it very well. We're in the process of talking to a family member right now, and um,
Mhm.
David, if you want to talk about it really quick, it's fine.
Oh yeah, well, yeah, we're working on a case with Rolla. I mean, it's a family member, so obviously the trust is there, and so he's already done some work with her in the past. And then yeah, just a lot of tax questions about tax implications of a certain sale he wants to make, but then eventually getting him to a place where he can retire at age. Yeah, no, his goal was age 60, I believe, if I remember correctly, right? Rolla, he wants
62. Yeah.
62, yeah. So we have about a 15 years before that. So we want to get a rock solid plan in place for him to meet that goal and just figuring out, what do you want? And then we'll try and make a way of making that work for him. So yeah, I'm optimistic we'll be able to do some really good things for him here in the next few months.
But you guys, I just want you just to take advantage of Tyson, Alec, David, if you guys want to reach out to David, but like these people have been in the business for some years and they've been with Transamerica for some time. And I'm getting really excited with all this new rollout here with the new platforms and Fidelity platform and all that. So just take advantage of them. Like David has been so patient with me, Tyson. Everyone here is such a good group of people to work with.
All right, thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah. And so, and Alec, there's one more thing Alec wanted me to cover, and that was to give you guys some tangible things in regards to referrals and how I'm getting referrals. And so once again, these are things that have worked for me. When I first started in this business, I was in a completely different hierarchy. It was a hierarchy that the upline did securities, but my direct leadership did not. And so my training was you give the client a blank piece of paper and then you go through a scripted presentation and you tell them, as I'm going through this presentation, I want you to write down 3 names that you can think of people that need to hear this presentation. That was what I was told for referrals. I never did that. I just didn't. I didn't like that feel. I mean, if that's what people are trying to do, that's fine. But here's the thing: I didn't feel comfortable because I knew the presentation, but I didn't really know what went into it behind it. So it just that never worked for me. Whenever I ask how I'm paid, I always mention referrals. So there will be people that will ask you, how do you get paid? Now, how we explain our fees, I mean, we're very transparent in our fees. It's basically a percentage of the assets under management. And if you're doing like a Jackson annuity, there's no fee. I mean, depending on what you're doing, the fees are going to be different. But you can explain the fees, but then also say another way I get paid is if you can refer me to your clients. If it's a client that I'm maybe not really liking working with, maybe I won't ask that question. But if it's a client that like, let's say it's 60, 65 years old, and I'm like, this, I want to work with people like you, I say that. I said, people that are in your situation, if you've got coworkers, if you've got friends, if you've got family that are going to be retiring here shortly, please send them my way. I'd be happy to help them navigate that. I've gotten so many referrals just by doing that. And then also, the second thing is taking good care of your existing client base, making sure that if you're not taking care of your clients, you're probably not going to get referrals. And I also can't tell you how many times in the past 10 years I've come across somebody that had an advisor and they'll say, I haven't heard from this guy in 10 years, or I haven't heard from this guy in 7 years, or, I'll get an email for him, every 2 or 3 years. Like there, so many accounts are just on autopilot. These people aren't being helped. It's not being managed. Some of them have multiple 6 figures. It's just amazing how little service they're getting for the money that's being managed. And so by us taking care of our clients and managing that, letting people know that you're being taken care of, that goes a long way into getting referrals from your existing client base. And also, when I send emails, I don't do AI generated or copy paste or anything like that. It's just personalized email to them specifically. And then another thing, as this really kicks off and gets up and running, you need to be organized. You need to have some type of spreadsheet or system or pipeline to track your leads. If I get a lead, it goes right into the pipeline. It goes right into my tracker. You can use Trello. That's 100% free. You can use, Google Calendar. You can use all these different free tools, but to have some system to be able to track them. This Betterment migration, for example, I have a Trello board for the Betterment migration, and every step of the process, I have a different list, so I know where every single client is in this whole entire process. And that being organized and being able to track those things is helpful. And I know Tyson taught me this my first year. He said he was always looking at his pipeline, like constantly looking at it. And so that's something that I would do. I have a TV in my home office, and I will have my pipeline or my tracker right there. And that's something that's always fresh in your mind. Like, I got to talk to this guy. I got to talk to this person. I haven't talked to them in a while. It's constant memory refresher to have that visually in front of you all the time. So that's been very helpful for me. And then the last thing I would say is give it time. If you're doing all the right things for a long enough period of time, this will work. It's the same principle as compound interest, where if the more time that you have in your favor, the more it's going to work. Like I said, I'm getting so many referrals in the last 12 months just from relationships that I built over a decade ago. So even if you feel like something's not really panning out right now, just keep building those relationships and keep cultivating those, cultivating new ones, and keep working with the ones you have. So that's pretty much what I wanted to cover. If there are any questions, I could field those.
Yeah, I don't have any questions, but I would echo a
Yeah.
lot of what you said. So, I've gotten a number of referrals that are now clients, and something back in 2024, Tyson had told me, hey, his marketing plan was not how much can I post on LinkedIn or Facebook. It's if I can take care of my existing clients organically over time, they will refer me to the right people at the right time. And you never know who your next referral is going to come from, or how big or how small they're going to be. And to treat those people as if they are your mom or your dad really, I think, sets the tone for how you can serve them. So I have clients that love me to the moon and back. and will never think twice about ever referring someone to me. And I have to be okay with that. And I have some clients that are literally fringe clients and they will refer the best and biggest clients. You just never know. So, like for instance, I had mentioned yesterday, this afternoon, I'm getting back in touch with a client that I have not been able to get a hold of for about 3 years now. And this afternoon, I'm then meeting with a friend of his who's an oncologist. And this existing client of mine is not an oncologist. Last time when we set his account up, he was sleeping on his buddy's couch. And so those are two very different career paths. You just never know when these people are coming from. So if we can treat everyone the same, but I think explaining, obviously, that's part of the process. Hey, I do want to serve more people. And so if there's a way that I can, but I think giving examples along the way, and I think I've even had referrals come up where we get the client meeting done, and hey, how's work going, and just kind of like catching up, and hey, that's why we wanted to meet. I'm really excited to retire in the next 6 months. I want to get out, and Timmy was telling me that he's mad too. He's ready to get out of work. Well, hey, do you know what he's doing? You know what his plan is? Boom, I just got in touch with Timmy. So things like that, we can't premeditate it, and I think the more we premeditate it, the more inorganic it's going to be, the tougher it's going to be. So the more natural we can make it over time, the more organic those referrals come. But when we're calling people, and quite frankly, in my first couple of years, I was calling people every probably month because I only had 10 clients. But I was just like, hey, who do you know this month? Like, who do you know this month? No referrals came from that, but I had to get through that process. So, I mean, David talking about getting connected with industry professionals, that's great. But if you're new, I would not recommend, someone like Tony, for example, I'm seeing you in my view. I wouldn't call every, mortgage broker in town, hey, I'm a year into the industry. Just, I want you to refer everybody to me. It's not going to work that way. So in time, you'll make some relationships, but most of the referrals are going to probably come from sat down with a coworker of mine, or I'm talking to family or friends or a neighbor because I'm new in business, and they might say, hey, maybe I'm not looking to do something, but hey, my coworker or a friend or a family member, those are the really good referrals that we'll get over time.
Man, I loved everything you said.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, we could have broken that up into two trainings, I think, too. There was a lot there. Um, yeah. The only thing I would say would be I think pros make complicated things look easy. And I think what David just rattled off is kind of you can tell he has a command of what he's doing, right? But I know he's put a lot of work into that, and he hasn't always looked and sounded like he does today. And but there's a confidence to David. I think David, you come across really credible. You come across really approachable, easy to talk to, organized. Yeah, that's what people want, right? I want a nerd. I'm not calling David a nerd, but like for my accountant, I want a nerdy accountant that loves spreadsheets and numbers and the tax code. You know what I'm saying? For a doctor, I want a doctor that's has this blend of like intelligence and experience, but incredible communication. My wife, if she were on this call, she'd be rolling her eyes because she can't stand, because I have an opinion about everybody we like do business with, so to speak. And we have a couple amazing doctors, professionals, and we have a bunch of average ones. And that's just the world we live in. And I love working with somebody we have a particular one that I just love. And she is such a great communicator. And I have a higher level of confidence when I go in and meet with her, with one of our kids. And I think this business is the same thing. You guys, the pathway to massive success here, you don't have to be a portfolio manager. You don't have to be an expert or have a CFP or have a degree. You just have to be really easy to talk to. You got to be organized. And I think that comes across. How do you demonstrate being organized? I think how attentive you are. How are you dressed? How do you carry yourself? Carry yourself. Those are little things that go into somebody making a decision. Hey, am I buying this person or not? Because my people buy me, right? They don't even remember where their money is and how do I log in here again. They just trust that, hey, Tyson's handling this for me. That's what we're selling. And so to the degree that you can be intentional about building those skills and thinking about how do I communicate? How do I, how good am I at taking concepts and explain them in a way where people can understand them? Okay, that makes sense. I can get that, and those are the soft skills that we could spend, endless amounts of time in, and we will, week after week on this training. So couldn't say enough, David. Love being in business with you, and
Dude, man,
proud of all
again.
your growth, man. And it's awesome to see what this business has done for your family. But we're just in many ways, I feel like we're just getting started. So
Yeah. Yeah. Next three
yeah,
years will be exciting for sure.
absolutely.
Okay. All right. I guess one thing I wanted to mention, I mean, what you just said, Tyson, I sat down with a couple and the husband said, I don't understand what you just said, but I am so excited. He's like, I'm so excited. His wife's like, don't worry, I got it. Just to say you're fine. But it was just funny how he was like, he was ready to go after that meeting. He's like, I don't get it, but I'm ready to go. So yeah, it's funny.
Love it. Love it.
All right.
Cool. All right. Well, yeah, let's stop here if there's no other questions from the group, and we'll get this uploaded. And then um, part of this, I was just thinking of this now. If you have questions after the recording or later today, all of you, or hopefully all of you now, are on the Facebook page. We want a lot more activity on there. And so if you've got questions throughout the week, like I had the question about our Fidelity fund that we talked about at the beginning of this, feel free to post those things inside that. I'm the number one contributor because I just put the reminders about trainings and then the recordings on there. So if you have a great client call or you have a great client meeting, feel free to put those things in there. You don't have to wait until we do an intro and do the intro every Tuesday. If you have a question, put that thing in, put those things in there. So engage on our Facebook page. That's the whole purpose. We want to get some chatter going on. So yeah, well, I'll let us get back to work and look forward to connecting again next Tuesday.
All right. See ya.
Awesome. See you guys.